Hello, everyone.
Oh, hiya. Hi, guys. How you
Sorry,
doing?
We're a bit late because I got a glass for my drink because it's not really the most dignified thing. Every so often you just get something and go, oh, just kind of this huge cylinder.
Dignified isn't particularly something I associated with you anyway.
Thanks,
Well,
Helen.
there's
Thank
nothing more
you.
dignified than drinking a can of Monster Energy drink on camera. It's, so.
I'm still on
Well,
tea. Still on tea. Third week into dry Jan now. I'm so bored. So bored of it. So bored.
I'm
I
kind of
would
trying
lose
to.
my mind. We're in a blizzard in Toronto. Like, you can't go out anywhere because there's just like a mountain of snow everywhere. Dogs are having a great time. Humans are annoyed as hell. I would go crazy if I couldn't drink during this lockdown. Yeah.
Did you see that short film of the little kid who had decided to clear all the snow from his friends?
I think it was here.
What? Yeah, it looked like it was there. It was so funny. It's this little kid, and he's decided to clean the snow from his neighbors and everyone he knows. But the interview, he's just like, oh, it's so hard. There's so much to do. It's the funniest thing. It's like he had the idea to get a news team around, but then when they came around, he realized how difficult it was. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us another week. We've got a good show for you today. I'm afraid I'm going to have to rush off at 4:50 on the dot to pick someone up. But we have a really interesting guest for you. We're going to be speaking to Andy Lewis and hopefully Aaron Kimberley, who has also been invited but hasn't responded. But we're holding out hope.
Aaron Kimberley.
Sorry, that's the wrong name. What's his name?
Yes, that's the wrong name.
Aaron
Kimberley is my
yes, Aaron Kimberley is our trans friend.
Aaron Rabinowitz, I believe.
Aaron Rabinowitz. And he and Andy have been involved in a back and forth, something that, it's extraordinary it even happened, given the kind of cone of silence that exists around these issues among skeptics. And in fact, the whole subject of the discussion was Andy saying that, skeptics should be talking about this issue. So it just kind of went into a big back and forth that's quite fascinating for a number of reasons. We've only got 20 minutes to talk about it. Andy's joining us half past, but we'll hopefully get into some of it. It's an extraordinary exchange.
It's extraordinary that skeptics aren't talking about this. This is the central issue of our time, it feels like, and it really needs to be parsed out on scientific terms. It needs to be the light of reason and critical thinking needs to be shone on it. And these are the people who are self-professed, self-proclaimed kings of that domain. And they are such a disappointment, aren't they?
Yeah, for years as well. Really, quite early on, the sort of the skeptic movement sort of said, no, we're not. It's transphobic, and it's been like that ever since.
Yeah,
you would as exactly as you say, Artie. These are the people that you'd expect to be straight in there with a sort of thoughtful, nuanced take on it. But it turns out, no, not so much.
No, it turns out the skeptical movement is actually just another uncritical religious movement like any other. Their treatment of Ophelia Benson, a wonderful philosophical mind, blogger, critical thinker, author, she just asked some very honest, straightforward questions as somebody who is a philosopher and a critical thinker and a rational person and a skeptic would do. And people treated her like she was a neo-Nazi, essentially. It was appalling the way she was treated. And that was the beginning and the end of the skeptical movement for me. I was a big fan of it for a long time. Yeah.
There was, by the way, someone's saying if Aaron Kimberley was invited, that'd be the final straw. What the fuck are you talking about? Aaron's amazing.
Oh, because people can't stand our trans allies.
I see. Okay. Yeah. Well, luckily, it's not their show. The thing about the skeptics. I mean, I know I've said this before, but I went to a skeptics conference. I was interviewed by John Ronson, who's a skeptic on everything except this. And John and I went to this, and I think I knew the person who was in charge of the skeptics at the time, who is gender critical, but is a coward and isn't coming out publicly about it. But the interesting thing about the Skeptics Conference was I've never met crazier people than at the Skeptics Conference. It was very, very interesting. I met and no offense, but like I met a witch, right? So that's not something you would expect at a Skeptics Conference. I'm not saying witches are crazy. A lot of people who like to be witches and consider themselves witches, but it was just a strange thing to hear at a Skeptics Conference. I also met a 9/11 denier at the Skeptics Conference. So it seems that skepticism has lost its kind of moorings a little bit with rationality, and it instead means, well, I'm just going to think something really strange that no one else believes because I identify as someone who believes that way. So
it's a movement for people who think they're the smartest person in the room and therefore don't do any actual thinking.
Yeah,
I do think I think it is a problem if you start to identify yourself as a skeptic or part of the rational movement.
Yes,
I do think you have to actually live up to what you're declaring yourself to be, possibly more than other movements. It's already I'm going to be quite skeptical of your skepticism because you've made a big point of it. So
yes.
So if you were then going to not do it, it's just it's just more than disappointing, isn't it? It's just ridiculous.
And the interesting thing as well about the trans movement is how extraordinarily oh my God, the word, I had the word and it just jumped out of my head. Oh shit, what is it? God damn it. Going along with what everyone else is believing.
That
word.
Let's just go with going along with what everyone is believing.
Conformity.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about trans rights, it is the most conformist movement I've ever seen. It completely runs on mantras and repeated phrases and lack of critical thinking. It is essentially a conform or die movement, So it's always amazing to me that skepticism has anything to do with it. Do
you know? I was thinking about what this movement is just this last week, and it's more than just a conformist movement. It's a destructive movement, isn't it? It occurred to me that there's no positivity in it. There's no real positive activism. There's no sign of an actual sort of manifesto as to, well, this is what we're after, and these are the reasons why. It's all about tearing down, not building up. It's tearing down boundaries. It's tearing down women and men who actually care. It's about tearing them down personally, insulting them, denigrating them, sneering, jeering. There's no positivity. There's no fun in it. It is extremely destructive. I mean, I can state what my position is. I think
yes, that's an interesting aspect.
We should have single-sex spaces for those spaces where women are in a position of vulnerability, like changing rooms, prisons, sports. I think we should be extremely careful around puberty blockers. I think they should do a huge amount more research into the effects before they start sort of handing them out. And I think that actually we should really be careful around language. Now, these are the three things that I believe I care about, and I want to see change, or I want to see, or actually not even so much change in some of them. I just want to keep the status quo. But the sort of trans activism doesn't really have this. They can't. You ask it occurred to me. Trans activism has been sort of read its Miranda rights, and it refuses to state what rights it's fighting for.
Yes.
Lest it be held against them, used against them. And it's incredible. It's just silence. It's in case they incriminate themselves, it's just like asking this question. People will not say what they want because they're worried about incriminating themselves. And honestly, if you're fighting for something that you're unwilling to state out loud, there's got to be the point where you think, should I be fighting for this? Do I even believe in this? Or am I
even know?
Am I using it to actually tear down other people, to destroy something else? It's really quite sinister, I think.
I think of Ellen Page, you know, when she became Elliot Page, she didn't look happy. We've talked about this on the show many times. But the first thing she said, she didn't say she's joined the ranks of happiness. She sort of gave lip service to, I'm so happy now that I'm trans. But what it really was is, I'm part of the most oppressed group of people in the world. She's trying to say, you know, this is an A-lister who's on the Canada's Walk of Fame, who's a child star in Canada, one of the most famous Canadian celebrities, film celebrities of all time. Is talking, she's looking for something to make her oppressed. She's looking for like a heavy blanket to put over herself because of the unbearable lightness of being rich and famous. You know, she's looking to join the ranks of the people who have problems. She's looking to join an oppressed minority. And that's what made her happy, I think, as a trans person. You know,
here's a funny thing.
Ellen Page doesn't look happy at all. Not in any sort of picture, not in any interview. There's no happiness there. And again, you know, this movement does actually attracts people who are unhappy, doesn't it?
It certainly does, yes.
Graham,
what happened?
Have I disappeared?
Yes, you've got this little thing that moves every time you talk. It's quite easy. Your camera.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
I've sometimes.
Oh no, we can't hear you anymore.
We're live, folks. Welcome to live. The show must go on. Back for a second.
Yes, but again, you know, I do think a lot of people actually join, or when I say join, you know, they sort of attach themselves to the movement because it's enjoyable, isn't it? It is about, they are unhappy, they want to be unhappy. I mean, I had somebody today trying to denigrate me. I replied to Buck Angel. I saw that Buck Angel had said that if people called Buck she on Twitter, they'd get reported.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
I
actually thought that this was. I mean, I don't agree with this. Now, you know, Buck is allowed to want to be called whatever, but reporting people with, you know, there's no other reason for reporting except for the intention of getting people banned off Twitter, off the public square. And it's such an authoritarian, unjust, I think, thing to say. And so I replied saying, you know, I do think that this is unjust and unfair, and you know, it's unpleasant as well. Now you can talk around why you believe somebody should call you he rather than she, but to try and punish women who draw the line at biological sex. And let's face it, the line has really, we've been forced to pull back that, you know, we've been forced to sort of hammer this line down in concrete because, you know, we tried the be nice, be kind, and look what it got us. But anyway, so I replied saying, you know, this is what I believe. I think that this is an unjust thing to do. And somebody replied to me, laughing and jeering, saying, "Oh well, if all your friends are on Twitter and you don't want to lose them, you know, get a life." And I was saying, you know, that you can believe that, but actually, I have met and made friends with some extraordinary people through Twitter. You know, people that I really care about, women who are great. And when I was banned off Twitter, it was really, really upsetting to lose those connections, which of course is part of the point of it. But the jeering and sneering that came along with this, and it made me, you know, to think, oh, get a life. These are just Twitter people like your friends. And I thought, well, yes, a lot of Twitter people are absolutely my friends. And I wonder that, you know, does this come along with the sort of the negative activism that happens? You know, maybe people on the other side, let's say, so much don't tend to actually make so many great connections and friends, because it is all about tearing down, not getting together to build up and create.
Yeah.
You're still gone.
I know. I think this is good. It's going to have to stay like this, guys, because for some reason my camera is just not talking to the computer.
Do you have it open in another tab?
You could put it on your phone. You could try your phone.
Oh, really? Is it that bad that I'm going to have to?
No, it's not that bad. But you could try. Maybe your camera's occupied.
No, not
by
at all.
another tab.
Not at all. I mean, it's fine. I mean, it's absolutely fine. It's just that if you wanted to come back.
No, well, I'll if there's a moment when one of you is boring me, I'll see if I can fix it. But yeah,
but I want to say, I want to go to your point, Helen. When somebody says, "Oh, who cares? It's just Twitter. Obey the rules," that already is a capitulation to like. It doesn't make sense. It's like saying Twitter is important enough that you have to forget about your own principles and just obey the rules. That's a terrible way for people to behave, to just give up something that is a right to say, because you'll lose access to Twitter if you don't.
Yes.
That's so ridiculous. I totally understand that for many people. I loved Twitter for a long time, but I'm really so happy to not be on it right now. Having my own Twitter clans is like the greatest thing. But I understand how valuable it is for so many people. Yeah.
Also, the my favorite thing is the way all these fucking faux left-wing bros are like kind of outsourcing their ethics to a Silicon Valley company, and not only that. But they're fucking ringing the cops on women. They're calling the cops on women. These are people who have, what's that phrase? All cops are ACAB in their all cops are bastards in their thing. But they'll fucking get the police. They'll get the police round to a woman's house. In fact, I've just heard that girl guiding. There's like
I saw that.
Yes,
I saw that.
Girl guiding are apparently sending cops around to anyone asking why they have a fetishist who likes automatic weapons working for girl guiding. It's extraordinary.
Well, I mean, to be fair, I think people were saying that it seems like quite a coincidental thing. They write to the girl guides or they email the girl guides, and the next thing the police are phoning them up to have an informal chat. And I think it's happened to more than one woman. And so, you do actually have to start drawing the conclusion that this is actually what's happening here.
I think as always, the best thing about our opponents is the way they behave. Everything they do just piques more people. So it's great news that girl guiding that the police are getting in touch with people about this. Because and Twitter again, there seems to be such a disconnect amongst these people, right? Like Twitter is another good example. Twitter just banned Rob Jessel, who used to be in Fair Cop. Yes, permanently, because he shared a photograph of top surgery. Someone replied to an LGB Alliance tweet. LGB Alliance's new campaign where they have vans that say, being gay is not an illness, These vans are going around and someone replied and they said, yeah, just trying to stop kids from having health care. And Rob responded to that. Rob responded to that in exactly that way. He put healthcare in quotes and he put a picture of some of the butchery that's going on at the moment. And they banned him permanently.
It's astonishing. You just want to show people what is being done, and there's nothing more powerful, I think, than these images of teenage girls with scars across their chest.
That's why they're
with these artificial smiles on their faces. That's so heartbreaking. It just crushes my soul every time I see one.
And yet I can go on.
We endorse this, but if you show us what's happening, we're going to ban you.
Oh yes. This is yes. I mean, it's again. This is what I was saying. It's a movement that fails to or refuses to state what rights it's gunning for in case it may incriminate itself.
Exactly.
This is the same thing, isn't it? It's the same thing. It's this is what we want. Oh God, no! But don't show it to us. I mean, I had I had another chap just today start in on his it's all bigoted, etc., etc. And so I said, do you believe a male-born person with a penis should have a right to undress in communal change rooms where women and girls are undressing? And his reply was, do you believe that gay men should have the right to undress in communal change rooms, or gay men with a penis should have the right to undress in communal change rooms where men and boys are undressing? Well, obviously yes. And furthermore,
women.
He went on to say
gay men should whip their dicks out in front of women and girls.
And then he said, also, do you believe that lesbian women with fingers should be allowed to undress in communal change rooms where women and girls are undressing? And I'm like, so this bloke not only has made this insane point, he seems to believe that the female equivalent of a penis is fingers.
Wow,
But
that's
this
going to
is
really
what
make
caused-
me look at holding hands in a different way.
Oh yes, I've had loads of people, stripping gloves off
Yeah.
memes, and actually it was hands. He said a lesbian woman with hands, and you're like,
Lesbian
it shows,
woman
doesn't
with
it?
hands.
For him, it's all about females. It's all sex is penetration. You can't possibly say with a vagina. It's got to be something. It's got to be something.
But
also,
before
the argument
what an
ad absurdum,
insane
it's
answer.
like, if you won't let women with hands who are potentially going to assault other women with their dangerous fingers, then you might as well let all men in. You might as well, this is what they don't even realize that is the actual literal argument they are making. They're saying it's absurd to bar men with penises from exposing themselves in women's spaces because women have fingers and they could theoretically do it too. That is the actual argument they're making, and it is the actual argument they're making it. Yeah.
But so then I continue to say, well, yes, and oddly, yes. However, can you answer the question?
Mm-hmm.
And he replied, say, I do believe that trans women should be able to use women's spaces. So I said, so you do believe that male-born people with a penis should have the right to, etc., etc. And he came back with, no, I didn't say that. And I'm like, well, which is it? Which is it? What do you actually believe? What are you after? But
I think a lot of people.
It was about denigrating me, calling me a bigot, being awful and unpleasant. But
I think a lot of people still think we're talking about transsexuals. I think still people still think that transsexuals are the vast majority of people who identify with the word trans, and it's so fucking outdated.
But I don't think this bloke did. I think again, he's one of the I'm going to jump on the bandwagon in order to be able to denigrate women, self-righteously and self-servingly, build myself up as a good guy. And say, oh look, you just bigoted. These are the same arguments that use it against gay, blah 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 blah. But when actually pinned down, he's like, no, I didn't say that.
Well, nobody wants to acknowledge who we're talking about. They don't realize if they won't make a distinction. I feel like you need to sit these people down and be like, we live in a world where cross-dressing for sexual arousal is a thing that exists. If you look up cross-dressers for sexual arousal on a porn app, the word you're going to use to find them is trans. That's how you are going to find them. That's how they identify themselves. So why do you think fetishistic cross-dressers aren't going to call themselves trans in any other environment? It's like when you go into the bedroom and you mute your phone and you turn off the lights and you open the private browser and you start looking at your porn and you unzip your pants. Everybody knows that trans is a sex thing. But then in the light of day, everybody has to pretend that trans is this magical, neutral thing that has nothing to do, with all of these things. That it doesn't always. Obviously, there are a lot of people who are transsexual for a lot of reasons. But one of the primary reasons people identify as the opposite sex is, sexual paraphilia. What are you going to do if you're going to say trans women are women? What are you going to do to keep the paraphiles out? And then they look at you like, I'm just going to pretend paraphilia doesn't exist.
And this is the point, isn't it? A lot of people's activism starts and ends with shouting trans women are women at women. But when questioned about, so what are the consequences here? What are you after? What do you want by shouting this? It turns out that what they want is simply to be able to shout this. That's it. That's what they want. They want to be able to denigrate and tear down and be unpleasant. It's an extraordinary movement. I've never seen anything like it. I mean, I wasn't involved in Gamergate. Maybe Gamergate was something like it.
It's good that you bring up Gamergate because it's about social media, people finding factions and tearing at their enemies. I think social media really brings that out in people. They like to find enemies and attack them. They like to find an in-group and an out-group. Yeah.
Yes.
The more I'm in this fight, and the more I think about Gamergate, the more I realize that this really is just an extension of Gamergate. Like basically, Gamergate was an attempt to drive women offline. And there was all sorts of things mixed in with it that it wasn't just that, but one of the main things was driving women offline. And I remember at the time, like I was fighting it like a good little left-wing guy, a good feminist ally, trying to fight it and trying to stop all this from happening. And one of the things that I saw that the people whose side I was on were telling me about Gamergate was, oh, there's all these men pretending to be women, and they're saying fake things to make women look bad. And I was shocked, and I was really outraged. In fact, the one example of me misgendering someone is that when a Gamergater wrote to me and was making some, bullshit argument, and it was, and I said, "You're a woman pretending to be a man, thinking that these was still bad." But that was used later on against me as if this was proof that I'm just like, I like abusing trans people. So the rule during Gamergate of you shouldn't pretend to be a woman completely changed after Gamergate, and everyone pretending to be a woman is actually the best person in the world.
Unbelievable.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
But I wanted to just I was actually making a different point earlier on when you two started fucking going on.
Sorry, I cut you off, Brent. Yeah.
It's because we can't see you. We're ignoring you.
I know.
Where is he?
It's like my face is in a permanent. I want to interrupt. No. But what I was going to say was what I find is really strange is the lack of ability to read the room. Like Twitter has its share price is plummeting. People are moving over to Getter, partly just to annoy Twitter and partly because a lot of Trump fans are on there and all this sort of thing. But a lot of feminists are on there because they're being driven off Twitter. So,
yes.
I actually don't think Getter has much of a chance of being a competitor because it's so transparently a platform to re-elect Trump. They don't really seem to want to do anything beyond that. But if they did start taking it seriously, they could get a lot of users pretty quickly. It could actually be a contender. But anyway, the thing I want to say was like Girl Guiding haven't noticed that. Oh, maybe we should row a little bit easier on this fucking guy with the automatic weapons dressed in fetish gear. Maybe we shouldn't be defending him as hard. No, the police are now involved. Do you know what I mean? Twitter is like, oh, our share price is dropping. Maybe we should stop banning women for saying that dicks aren't female. No, still full speed ahead. Let's ban Rob Jessel. I mean, the inability to read the room is going to be the end of these guys. And I tell you what, Keir Starmer making jokes during Prime Minister's question time, laugh it up all you want, but it's going to be a tight election if you don't drop the anti-woman stuff. It's going to be fucking squeaky tight. It's going to be like Biden and Trump all over again. Hey, listen, Andy is here, so let me explain to him what's going on. And Andy, just before you come in, I haven't turned into a glowing orb.
Hiding.
My camera is not working. And now that you're here, it's too late for me to try and restart the computer, which I was going to do. So let me bring you in. Hi, Andy. How's it going?
Fine. Can you hear me okay?
Hi, Andy. Yes.
Good,
yes.
good.
How lovely to have you here.
Yeah, thank you.
We have brought you on because you became engaged in something that is extremely rare, which was an actual conversation with a skeptic who is on the other side of the debate when it comes to gender issues. Now we've invited Aaron. We've sent him loads of tweets. He must be away from Twitter or something because he hasn't responded. But how did you get in touch with Aaron? How did it come about? First of all,
Twitter. I think
you just tapped him on the shoulder.
Yeah, well, I can't remember the exact details because it started quite a few months ago, to be honest. In that, I think I can't remember who invited who actually, but I think he challenged me essentially to come on one of his podcasts or something or have the debate. And unfortunately, at the time, I had a little bit of a crisis at home because my dog got hit by a car, and so Twitter was fine. He was fine. Okay, he's built like a steel, whatever, Okay. So the car was a write-off. So yeah, my mind for a week or so was on other things. So then I let it drop and forgot about it. Twitter is ephemeral, and what happens 1 hour ago is soon forgotten. So I forgot. But then I got engaged with him again, and he said, "Oh, you've never engaged with me." So I said, "Well, I better do this thing." And we had a bit of a chat behind the scenes to work out what the terms of engagement should be in the medium we would use, and so on and so forth. So yeah, it quickly happened.
And is Aaron himself trans? Or
I'm sorry. Sorry, say again.
No, he's not. That was
so
a mix-up
Aaron
from
is not trans.
No.
He's the only
just
Aaron who isn't trans, apparently.
But he's part of the skeptic movement, and so this is what the root of this.
Well, he writes a lot for the Skeptic magazine here in the UK, so he's
Right.
quite well roped in. So there's no official entry requirements for being a skeptic, but he's hot on the scene. So and connected to people that are movers, jokers, shall we say? Yeah.
It's an interesting one. It starts off with you being very clear about what the central question you want to debate is, which is is this something that the skeptics movement should be debating? That was that was where you began. Why? Can you first of all explain why you cannot debate this within or up until now? Because I noticed there's a new issue of the Skeptic that apparently that has lots of trans issues on the cover, which is a good sign. Yeah. But can you tell us what it has been like trying to discuss this issue so far for you?
Well, it's been like trying to discuss it everywhere else, which is a shocking thing, really.
You say that one more time? What did you say? Sorry.
It's been like trying to discuss it anywhere else.
Right.
The reactions are exactly the same. Okay. Yeah. There's a complete lack of engagement with arguments. Everything is about people's motives and their political allegiances, and so therefore whatever you say must be wrong if you're not falling exactly in line with the approved line. And this was a shock to me when I think I mentioned in the letters when I first came across it, discussing what I thought was quite innocuously a child custody case where the judge had written the judgment, and it was a remarkable judgment. And I thought, this is incredible, what the mother was trying to do to her child,
Oh, this is the mermaids case. I know this one.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Child J case. And I'm just saying something pretty much like that. This is incredible, What's going on here? Who are these people, mermaids? I was immediately put in the naughty step, okay? And people unfriended me on Facebook and apologized to their friends for being exposed to such extreme transphobia. And I thought, what was that? Because I hadn't really thought about it much for this issue for many years, and I didn't realise that it was my fault. I didn't realise that there was all this stuff going on.
Well, they fly under the radar, don't they? As much as they can. Yeah.
So I started.
Sorry. Well, it's just I'm just skimming it again now, and immediately it sort of jumps out at me that the first letter there's talk about moral panic, and I think it doesn't seem to me like a reasonable way to start, to immediately go in with the assumption that your opponents are actually in the midst of a moral panic,
especially Helen, especially when as opposed to what, Helen? As opposed to let's keep it neutral and ask our opponents, allow our opponents to state what the issues are, what it is that we're fighting for. Especially since, as you yourself say in the exchange, Andy, the moral panic comes from people, apologizing for you, unfriending you. That sounds more like moral panic.
A complete panic.
Panic is exactly the right word. Panic is right. Yeah.
Yes, that is true, actually.
So I don't know if you follow the Jesus and Mo cartoon strip, which has been
of course wonderful. Yeah, I mentioned it in my essay that I wrote.
How is that guy still alive?
I do know him.
Anonymity.
Oh dear. Oh wow.
So one of the things that keeps him alive, he's anonymous, of course, but he is a skeptic. Okay. Yeah. And one of the few that has reached out to me and said, "What's my what is going on with the skeptic movement?" I won't say his exact words because I'm quite rude.
He's gender critical, isn't he? Yeah.
But his strip today was on the topic of Bulverism, okay, where Jesus, I think I've got it here, actually. I'll read out what Jesus says. "There's no point debating with you, barmaid. It's obvious that Satan has won your heart and closed your mind," okay? And And the barmaid says, well, if you attribute everything I say to the influence of Satan, you can dismiss it out of hand without even bothering to try to understand what I'm saying. So this strip is exactly about what C.S. Lewis called Bulverism, which is this idea that there's an assumption of you being wrong, okay, from the start, if you bring up certain types of topic, and that the only engagement you can have is on your motives, okay, for being wrong. Okay, and that's not how skepticism works, of course. In skepticism, it's perfectly legitimate for talking about motives, about why someone is wrong, but the critical step is to show that they are wrong. So what I think is going on here in the skeptic movement and elsewhere, everyone is gripped by the circularity of Bulverism, which is that as soon as someone speaks about it, you don't attack the substance. You always talk about the motivations of the various sides, the politics, the right and wrong. It's religious in its thing, but of course, you call people a transphobe for having a certain view. It's a moral thing, not a factual.
Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's so true. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a shame. It's so funny. A great example. It's embarrassing to say that I would hold P.Z. Myers up as an example of anything, but I used to admire P.Z. Myers because he would have this way of tearing at people that was very like, this person's such an idiot. Look at their idiotic argument. But then he would back that up by attacking the argument. He would start off with his personal attack, like this person's an idiot, but then he would back it up by going into the actual argument. And I always held that up as an example of this is the way you do it. You don't just say this person's an idiot for having views I disagree with and then walk away. You have to back it up by attacking the actual argument and going at it. But of course, P.Z. Myers has been a huge disappointment because he doesn't do that anymore. When it comes to the trans issue, he just says, oh, this person's a transphobe and walks away. The very thing that I held him up as a model of is the thing that he has completely abandoned. What a fool. I haven't even gone near his blog. I don't even know if it exists anymore. I'm sure it does. In years and years, Yeah.
Can you, Andy? Sorry. I was just going to, because we only have 10 minutes. We've got a very short time to do all this. So I just wanted to ask Andy. Andy, can you give we can't get deep into the nitty gritty of all the arguments, but can you give a brief overview of his techniques for debating with you in this letter writing exchange? What do you think he's doing? What kind of things is he doing?
It's that's a very good question. Looking at it, okay, there's a number of so there was one thing that stood out there. I probably made a mistake in the letters of being naive and making the assumption that certain things would not be questioned. Okay, and one of those things I thought would not be questioned is the massive increase of referrals to clinics like the Tavistock in London for paediatric referrals, which is many thousands of percent. And I think I put in the original letter 4,000.
4,000.
4,000. Yeah.
So it's a dishonest debating technique, because what I think went on there, both on and off those letters, loads of people on Twitter as well, they focus on the specific figure as if that made any difference. It was a fallacy of irrelevance, essentially, because I may or may not have been right about this exact number 4,000, and I may or may not have chosen the right reference to back it up and so on, but it's irrelevant because I gave a whole load of reference from many different sources that range between something like 2,000 and 4,000, of course, but the thrust of my argument was not at risk from whether or not that 4,000% figure was precisely right or not. Okay?
That's exactly right. It doesn't have to be precise.
Yeah.
It's a dishonesty, okay? Because the good faith argument, allows for a certain little bit of ambiguity if you're following the thrust of the argument, okay? So it's the constant nitpicking at little things rather than engaging with a substantial element, which is a fallacy. It's a type of thing that skeptics ought to be very honed at spotting, for example, when people...
You would think... if they had any integrity, that's the very thing they would be looking at themselves and be like, we attacked religious people for pulling this crap, and now we're using it. Like
it also seems like I like my understanding of a Gish Gallop. It seemed like you're just having lots of stuff thrown at you, not really giving you any time. I mean, like like one thing that I thought was fascinating is instead of providing a many 100-word piece answering you, he never gives you a simple definition of any of the key terms in this. Gender, trans woman, none of these. And as you say, I think a couple of times in the thing, you say it is really, really impossible to properly talk about these things until you tell me what your definition of these things are. But
it doesn't get a surface area to be attacked on. Essentially, if you never explicitly set out what you mean, then how can you ever be criticised?
Yeah.
I also note the absolute failure to defend what I would term one of the least defensible positions, which is trans women in sport. And I know that is off limits. That's simply being held up as that's off limits because
May I add to
it
that?
is used as a wedge issue.
Yes,
it's used as a wedge issue, and you're like, because it is.
And may I add, Helen? And may I add also, Andy, that it was in your first letter that you mentioned the sports. You absolutely establish it as one of the central aspects that need to be spoken about, and he essentially says, no, I don't want to talk about that. It's extraordinary.
So it worked both ways as well, because there's one area I said I really didn't want to talk about, and that was a toilet issue, because I didn't really want two blokes deciding whether women or not can go into men or not. So he ignored that because he felt that that was a strong point for him. Amazing.
Better ignore it.
By the way, I should add again, we are kind of laughing about it, but we did invite Aaron on, but he hasn't got back to us. So, what can you say?
It's a real shame, because I really love to have some actual discussions with these people. Even in the letter format, they can choose to ignore things outright. They can choose to just go up on their own personal tangents and, have their straw men that they yell about and ignore the actual arguments. But in person, we can hold these people to it.
That's why it surprises me he invited you to do a live thing, Andy. Is there any chance of that happening at any point?
I don't know. We're still on talking terms. I'm not familiar with the podcast, but I believe other people have been on it. I will consider that, absolutely, of course. But it's other people I really want to engage with as well. Who I've been blocked from, people at the science-based med website and so on, who I just can't get my head around. Some of the what you might call the best skeptics out there, and they invite in cranks essentially to defend their positions. Just extraordinary.
What kind of people are they inviting in?
Well, they had a series. It was they had one of their editors, the original editors, Harriet Hall, wrote a review of Abigail Schreier's book, Irreversible Damage, of course. That was right. And of course, the activists went spare. And demanded that it be taken down. And so instead of taking it down immediately, they decided to review it. And they got in a number of people to review it, including themselves. And one of them was actually the first non-binary gender medicine doctor in America, or something like this. And she is an excellent example of everything that is wrong with factory over there at the moment. No psychiatric assessment. Okay, whatever the child asks for, they get. He says this on her website. We do not, gatekeep or anything like that. And basically, a retail shop for puberty blockers. Okay, if this was any other form of medicine, they would be torn apart. They'd be, the morals and the ethics of it and the science-based, evidence-based, and so on would just be ripped to shreds. But there's a trusty shield of steel in front of it that prevents all that happening.
Yeah, it's extraordinary.
I think that these letters are actually important to have. I mean, I think a debate, as you say, Artie, can probably get more traction face to face. But it's interesting to see it all written down, because you can go back to it and you can look and you can see the extraordinary sort of arc of how it works, how the questions or how your points aren't really addressed. They're sort of often talked around, or a flat out said, well, this is used as a wedge issue, and therefore I'm not going to address it, despite it being really central. I mean, I do think it's interesting to have this as an example of how this, again, it's a movement that really doesn't want to defend what rights it is they're asking for.
Yeah,
Because,
but I feel like
you know,
the skeptics movement, I'm really glad that you are having these discussions. That's such a great point, Helen, because there are a lot of spectators watching this, and a lot of people are maybe not speaking out publicly because it's too toxic. And a lot of people, you know, you pay a very hefty price when you speak up about this topic, and you enter the public sphere, as Graham knows, as Helen knows, as I know, as you know. But there are a lot of people watching, and I hold out hope that the skeptics movement is. There are a lot of people who are looking at these discussions, these letters, and seeing that the arguments that the other side has do not hold up. I hold out hope that there are people who maintain the principles of skepticism and are seeing that, you know, you're making good points that aren't being rebutted. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead,
Andy.
I was going to say, I hope so. I mean, I did go into a bit naively in some areas as well, and it would probably change tactics if I did it again, perhaps. I mean, what it did show, there's a vast amount to talk about, and we only got on to 10% of it, really, deliberately. My point was, as I said in the first letter, I wanted to show there was lots to talk about here. Okay, lots of and in that case, I'd make an argument that I won. Okay, but I got criticised, of course, for not answering every question or not rebutting the loads of points. And of course,
that's pure Giscallop.
I wasn't intending in that letter things to win the argument on every point.
No,
so there was an argument.
Yes. Can I just say, I just, like, I'm going to have to, unfortunately, I'm going to have to go and pick up my daughter in a second. But just before we go, I just wanted to ask, one of the things that I was wondering is the letter starts great, but then his responses get kind of very, very bogged down.
Snarkier, and also a little bit snarkier, I believe, which is how I find these conversations often go on Twitter.
Can I ask? Do you think it's a deliberate? Sorry, Helen, but can I ask? Do you think
it's fine.
Just while we have Andy, do you think it's a deliberate attempt to kind of hide in the amount of detail and to kind of almost bore the reader into disengaging?
Well, I mean, that's the heart of what a gish gallop is, essentially, to introduce so many arguments that they're impossible to spend the energy in refuting all of them. Okay, so it looks like you can't. Okay.
Yes.
So whether it's done consciously or not, I don't know. But that is one of the difficulties of encountering any sort of nonsense, really, because people who spout the nonsense are very good at introducing lots and lots and lots of detail, but you can't possibly ever address every single point. So you see it with homeopaths and chiropractors and all the other weird and wonderful beliefs out there. Yeah.
Yes, well, you go and look at someone like what's his name, that conspiracy guy who thinks everyone's a lizard.
Yeah.
Like there's pages and pages and pages of stuff, and it all kind of and in fact sometimes it's hard to, because I saw a brilliant. Oh, anyway, no, actually, you know what? I was going to start rambling on, and I just, I'm so sorry, and I just interrupted Helen, so that would have been unforgivable. Let's just. Are there any plans for this beyond the letter campaign? Is anything that come about because of this, Andy, that we can look forward to?
There's no plans at the moment, but I'm always willing to have these discussions, of course.
Okay, great.
Yeah. So,
well, hopefully, Aaron will watch this and address some of the problems that we've had, and I do hope that, like, I will say this, Andy, if you could pass on to Aaron that we won't be using kind of derision or anything like that. We will simply ask the same kind of questions that we're asking here. He can be assured that we'll be polite and he won't be, but we do want to ask the questions.
And can I say, Andy, I do think hats off to you for attempting this, because it's also shown us a sort of. I mean, I know it's happened with a couple of people. I think Kathleen Stock had already done this too, but I do think that it's good to show how these things can work. I don't think it's a terrible idea at all to do this. And fair play to you for spending the time.
Yeah, we have to lead by example. We have to have good faith engagements with these people. And this person, we haven't personally insulted him at all on this show. We've been talking robustly about his arguments and how weak they have been, but that's not the same as personal attacks, you know?
Indeed. And not everyone understands that.
Listen, I'm going to have to go, guys. So I'm going to remove you, Andy, and say thank you so much. I hope you'll come back.
Yes, thank
again
you
when
so
something
much.
Like this happens.
It was lovely to talk to you.
Always great to have you on the show. Thanks, Andy.
Bye, Andy.
Speak to you soon. Bye-bye. Guys, I'm so sorry that I have to cut it short, but I have to do some family stuff. Lovely to see you both. That was great. I really enjoyed that. That was a really
fun.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
guys, thank you very much. See you again.
Thanks to
Like
all
and
our
subscribe.
Like and subscribe. See you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye.